The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the OSIP Foundation Incorporated or any other group or individual. This podcast may contain dialogue or subject material that could be considered for mature audiences only. All aspects of how you play the game and the OSIP Foundation Incorporated are protected by copyright and other state and federal intellectual property laws. Unauthorized use without the express written consent of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated is strictly prohibited. If you're interested in sponsoring How You Play the Game, please email us at podcast@osipfoundation.org. Your sponsorship may be tax deductible. Well, it's that time again. No, it's not time to take more allergy medication because tree pollen is a terrible, terrible thing. It's time for How You Play the Game, the official podcast of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated. Yours truly, Jack Furlong, with you as we talk to you about what's going on as far as the world of sportsmanship is concerned. This is the second episode of the month of April. The year is 2021. Thank you so much for being with us. As always, you can check us out online at osipfoundation.org. You can email the show with the address podcast@osipfoundation.org. You can check us out on social media, facebook.com/OSIP Foundation, Twitter and Instagram, both at OSIP Foundation, hashtag How You Play the Game. Across the way from me on the screen, as always, is the producer engineer of the show, Mr. Sean Ryan. Sean, hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic, other than the allergies, but we just discussed that. Yep. We have such an amazing show for everybody today. We got a number of guests here. So to introduce them real quick, first, returning to the show, friend of ours, the vice chairperson of OSIP, complete with very long hair and a brim of a cap that looks like it was mangled. I don't know. But Mr. Sean Gough. Sean, welcome. How are you, man?
God bless you. How are you guys?
Just fantastic. And our guest of honor today that I have to give Sean Gough the credit for. This man needs no introduction, and any introduction that I would give would be not enough. You've seen him on TV millions of times in the most important of games in the National Basketball Association. You currently may see him as a rules analyst for various NBA games, and it is just such a pleasure to have him on the show today, Mr. Steve Javie. Steve, how are you? Thanks so much for being here.
Jack, thanks for having me. And I think the only reason why I'm on here today is because Sean Gough is the one who promised me a hat just like his.
Sean, I would get off the thing right now and go buy that hat. Yeah.
You got it just right.
Yeah.
Had I known, I would have worn another, but it's okay.
Well, with Prime shipping, I think you can get it free shipping and rather quick. So
yeah, probably tonight.
There you go. So it reminds me of the time that my girlfriend bought me a maroon suit for something, and she ordered it at 7 a.m. And by the time she got home from work at 3, it was there, and it was hand delivered from Manhattan. So
wow.
Yeah. So if they can if they can deliver a pimp type suit for no apparent reason, you can get that hat. So,
and how quickly was that suit returned?
Let's see. Can time go backwards? Did I need to get in the DeLorean for that? In fairness, I had it hemmed first, just to make everybody feel happy. But yeah, well, that's a podcast for another time. So, Steve, I can't tell you how happy we are to have you, and again, thanks to Sean for setting all this up. You know, we when we found out that we had the opportunity to get you on the show, we were just kind of over the moon. And you know, I kind of feel like you have the resume to really give us some insight into some of the stuff that we've been kind of going at in our mission statement. You know, and because I feel like it can be so gray sometimes. The average person sometimes doesn't understand it from every point of view. And to have someone with your resume, with your experience in so many different walks of life as well, is so valuable. And as I'm researching, I didn't know this until I was doing the research. You actually started in baseball first as a pitcher in the Orioles system, and then as an umpire in I think the Florida State League with our good friend Jerry Lane. Is that correct?
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, Jerry. Oh my gosh, what a dear friend, and my gosh, you're bringing back memory, Jack. But you're right. Baseball was my first love playing wise, and I obviously, in my early 20s, after getting released and realizing that I was not good enough to play baseball anymore, I had to land something in sports because I just, like you guys, are in the sports world, love sports, still do love sports to this day. And I just feel really, really blessed that, I've made a living in sports, after all this. But yeah, baseball is my first love. But I think basketball, as I went through it in my early 20s, officiating wise, was just, I hate to say it for you umpires out there, it was a little more exciting for me than standing around on first base, third base, and just waiting and freezing in March in Philadelphia going like, oh my gosh, I have to make a call when?
Yeah. Yeah. You basically just described my entire spring right there.
Right. This has been a tough spring.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And as someone who did watch Jerry Lane last night work his game, he basically was doing that. Even though he was in Dunedin, Florida, he was just standing around waiting to make a call, I think, at third base. So,
right.
So there's
real quick, Jack, I'll tell you, my last game I ever umpired, I'll just throw this in real fast, is I came back from the Florida State League after like 2.5 years of umpiring in the minor leagues, making really a rash decision. And I quit actually very quickly. Came back and I got a college schedule here in Philadelphia. And as you were talking about springtime in college, that was about that time. And it was like, I guess it was the spring after I left the Florida State League, I should say. So my last game was like 15-14. LaSalle University was playing Spring Garden College. It was like 40 degrees, and each team, I think, had 10 errors. Oh. And I truly did this. After the game, I put I was behind the plate, of course, trying to call as many strikes as I could. And it didn't matter. And I put my umpire gear over in a corner that I'd never use again, made a phone call to the assigner and said, I think somebody else could use this money more than I could.
What's funny is I think what you just described is the freshman game that I have tomorrow in Montgomery. So my varsity game today was canceled for some unknown reason. So I'll just do it all. I'll do a 15-14 game tomorrow just in honor of that. But I don't have the plate tomorrow. So I'll just be standing around looking at trees thinking, hey, did I go to Wendy's twice yesterday? What's funny is, you talked about that rash decision to get out, but I was, when I was reading the some of the stories and whatnot, one of the stories that I really loved was the one where you ran a guy, I think it was Robin Roberts was the coach of that time. And you ran the guy in this game. And then the next day in class at umpire school, everyone gave you a standing ovation. And it was just kind of a surreal story because I got the sense that there were so many different points of view coming from it, because on one hand you have people who say, don't take any of this from these people, you take control of the game, etc. And on the other hand, it seems like when you do something like that, when you do have to make decisions that kind of take control of the game, sometimes that comes back to bite you a little bit. I mean, was that kind of how you felt during that experience?
During that experience, I had no idea what I was doing. I'll be honest with you. No idea. I went to umpire school. I have to tell you guys, never umpiring a game in my life, never stood behind home plate and didn't know what a stance was for an umpire. I had no idea. All I know is I love baseball, and I figured, let me give umpiring a shot. How hard can it be? Well, right. We all know how hard officiating can be, but it was my very first game. What they did in umpire school, they would assign you 3 innings, for this one game. And then another crew comes in for the next 3 innings. So you had 3 crews. One of the finest gentlemen, Robin Roberts was the finest gentleman I've ever met in my life. God rest his soul. The man is just a phenomenal human being. He was the coach. I think it was South Florida. I believe it was South Florida. And I made a call behind home plate. The ball goes out of play, and the runner from like first wanted to score. And I said, no, by rule, you have to go back to third base. And as the runner was running by me, he said a few words to me, which now that I realize an umpire, I shouldn't have done nothing really except just yell back at him. Maybe as a basketball official, call a technical foul. Did it warrant an ejection as I sit here now? No, of course it didn't warrant an ejection. I had no idea. But if I was going to call a technical foul in basketball, maybe the only thing I can do in baseball is I'll throw the guy's butt out of the game. And I did. And of course, Robin Roberts came to me And Steve, you can't do that. I did. And now I'm shaking in my boots because I have no idea if I did the right thing, the wrong thing. Matter of fact, Robin Roberts went to the guy who was the supervisor at the time of the game, one of the instructors, and I still remember his name, Scott Graham, who was a AAA umpire. And he went to Scott and he said, Scott, this guy's got no right to throw him out of the game, and he's making a big deal. Right now, I don't know if I've blown my chances to ever become a minor league umpire or not. But when I went back, as you said, Jack, I went back to dinner that night. We're all sitting there as our rules session started that evening. Bill Kinnaman, who ran the school, said, you know what, I have an announcement to make. We have our first ejection of the year, and it's by Steve Javie, and everybody started cheering. And I went, well, this isn't too bad. You mess up maybe a little bit, you throw somebody out of the game, and they cheer for you. That's pretty cool, I said, you know? So I think that was the start of knowing that it was okay to take charge of a game. That doesn't mean you're going to be right all the time. And then if you're wrong, you wonder why, and you try to curtail, you know, your temper or your excitement or so on. But I learned that, you know what, taking control of the game is what all the good umpires who were there at the time, and the guys who were at the school at the time were John McSherry, God rest his soul, Richie Garcia. You know, these guys were big time guys in baseball, and they were coming telling me, he goes, that's good, you know, way to take charge. But from there you learn when to throw someone out and when not to. That was not really the time to. I shouldn't have, but I learned from it a lot.
Yeah. Do you think that because I see this all the time in the training of youth umpires and umpires who are going through the various systems, even at the high school level, because the program of developing those types of attributes is kind of the same across the board, whether you're at umpire school or doing youth games or whatever. Would you rather, if you can even compare this, have a situation like yours where you almost go too far, for lack of a better term, and have to then learn to back it off, or the opposite, where an official in any sport has to learn kind of the hard way, you know, where they're not going to be able to control the game, and then they have to learn to kind of toughen up from there? Is one better than the other in our sports landscape, either at the professional level, at the youth level, wherever?
Yeah, Jack, I don't know if one is better than the other. I will say that the personality kind of dictates it. I truly believe that. And for me, from my experience and from what my bosses in the past have told me, and I kind of agree with them, it's so much easier to calm somebody down than to try to, you know, get somebody up to snuff or up to that level of like taking charge of the game. You either have it inside of you or you don't have it inside of you. And some people just don't have that nature to like grab the bull by the horns and say, I got it no matter what. And if I make a mistake, I don't care. Where like my old boss, Darryl Garrettson, would always like, he would send me films of my technical fouls. And most of the time is because I would call a technical foul after I missed a call and somebody would start yelling and I'd call it a technical foul. And he didn't mind sometimes when I overreacted, where he'd say, you know what, you probably shouldn't have called that technical foul that time because this happened and this happened. But he said, I'm okay with that because I can calm you down. He says, there's no doubt, but he says, it's hard to instill in someone that attitude or maybe just that personality of someone who wants to take charge. So I think it is probably easier to curtail somebody who has that aggressiveness in him, less as opposed to somebody who is less aggressive.
I see what you're saying. You know, and what I think is interesting about that is, like, in one of the articles that we were looking at, I think it was the one in Referee Magazine, you know, they interviewed a couple of people, one of which was your colleague Joey Crawford, who said, quote, that you were the only referee that he knew of who exemplified all three qualifications of a master sports official, which are rules knowledge, play calling, and game management. And Crawford claimed he struggled with it due to the temper and whatnot. So would that be, by comparison, that seems to be almost exactly what you're saying there, because we all know Crawford's reputation when he was working, and we saw yours and how you went from, like you said, the possibly with the quick trigger finger, so to speak, to learning how to manage the game and how to deal with those emotions, which is very important, I think, across the board in all sports and at all levels. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And first, I want to have a little thing about Joe Crawford. I mean, for him to say that, I know I've read that before, and I've heard him say that before. To me, is like the biggest compliment because Joe Crawford is one of my main mentors, if not my main mentor in the NBA, and I consider him probably the greatest referee to put on a shirt in the NBA. I mean, when you referee in 50 finals games, I mean, it's just incredible. And the man has this thirst and he just has this passion for officiating that is unsurpassed by anybody. And Joe Crawford to me is just an icon of officiating sports. But yeah, he's one thing that Joe taught me was to be aware of your weaknesses. And one thing Joe knew that his weakness was his temper, and he couldn't control it at times, and it got him in trouble. And he knows that it got him in trouble. I first came in as a hothead myself and realized through my mentors that I couldn't keep acting that way. I mean, I would see, working with Joe, I'd see him act that way. And then he would come in the locker room and say, don't act this way. I mean, he was a great teacher. He knew he couldn't control himself at times, but he also knew that he didn't want people he was teaching to act that way, the way he was acting. So, I mean, I learned after the first couple of years that I had something to prove, I think, to the players and coaches and also to my partners, that they would know that when they stepped on the floor, that I had their back too. So I had a lot to prove, but then I think once I calmed down after a couple of years, and I realized that, you know what, I think I've proven that point, and now I can approach it a little differently.
Right. No, I understand that. And it's funny that you bring up, what you said so nicely about Joey. The one thing I found interesting too is that, and I experienced this as well to a certain degree, the fraternity, the brotherhood, of officiating runs very, very deep in your family and the connections across the sports. I mean, you mentioned your dad worked Super Bowls, your godfather worked the World Series. The Crawford family is in both baseball and basketball. We mentioned you worked with Jerry Lane. I mean, is there anything, as we kind of transition to other topics on sportsmanship, that the average person, the average player, coach, parent, fan, media member, etc., can learn from the fact that officiating is this craft that is, honed so deeply by people of this officiating group, this fraternity, where the brothers and sisters in the group are working so diligently at it. And could that soften people, or could that provide a different perspective to the people who are so quick to pass judgment on officials or anything like that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think basically what you're saying, Jack, is to get to know the person and not just the shirt.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's human nature. If you get to know the person, then it's going to be harder to really go after somebody and criticize them that vehemently at times if you get to know them. So it's funny because I had this one situation early in my career, and I won't name the radio announcer, but he was always on their telecasts. Really, I mean, because I was a young guy, obviously making mistakes, trying to find my way in my profession, always got on me big time. And I know sometimes, like even Joe Crawford say, Steve, don't listen to that. Turn the volume off and just watch the game and, critique yourself. And this guy was forever on me. Well, probably in that same year, maybe months later, I look around, I'm in church on Sunday. I'm on the road. I went to church on Sunday and I turn around in mass and there he is. He saw me there and I saw him there. And it's funny how from that day on, he wasn't as hard on me as he was in the past.
Wow.
And I think that is part of what you're saying, Jack. If they would get to know us as people and know that we, as dedicated as whether you're a player, coach, or a broadcaster, as you are your profession, and we're trying to do the best darn job we can, I think there'd be a little more appreciation for that and probably less criticizing as vehemently as they do. But it's probably the nature of the business. I mean, we know going back from the start of any kind of leagues, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, It's just that these guys want to win so much and they want to blame somebody when they don't. And they think we're out to screw them all the time. And it's like, can I tell you something? That's the furthest thing from my mind. Because those players or coaches aren't that important in my life.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get plays right. I couldn't really, I hate to say, I could care less about you got 15 points or how many wins you have as a coach.
Right.
I'm trying to get as many plays right here as an official to be a proficient referee in my job. And that's what I'm trying to do. But unfortunately, Jack, it's going to be this way. But the funny thing is, to go to your point, the people that you do get to know somehow, whether it be in a charity golf event, whether you've been somewhere at the Hall of Fame event for somebody else and you get to know somebody, once they get to know that you're a human being that has a voice that you'll have a beer with and talk, all of a sudden your relationship becomes a little better.
Yeah. I mean, that's the perfect segue to the example I always point to is Vin Scully and Bruce Fleming. And ever since that night at the bar, all of the major league umpires would salute Vin Scully at Dodger Stadium because they began to understand that relationship. And Vin was always fair, and it was very beautiful to watch the relationship of how this god of sportscasting, so to speak, and the officials on the field having that mutual respect. And we just had a great example of that too, and it's not getting talked about because of what you just said. On Sunday Night Baseball this past week with the Braves and the Phillies, there was a controversial call at the plate that went to review, and the call stood because they did not have conclusive evidence. And the media and everything is blowing up, and they're yelling at everybody and this, that, the other. And I have to mute everything because I know in my heart what's happening behind the scenes. But what's not getting talked about is Brian Snitker, the manager of the Braves, who's the call went against, comes out to the umpires and says, "I'm not mad at you. I just want to know how they could make that call. What did they see? Excuse me. What did they see to make that call?" And obviously he's coming off as angry and the fans are feeding off of it, et cetera. And maybe he's trying to motivate his team, which is a whole nother psychological story for another podcast and dissertation. But I think you're right, is that we need to humanize these people, us, and say we are just trying to do the best we can. We're trying to be the best official. We're trying to start perfect and get better. And it's an impossible task. And the more we develop those relationships, the more that we can be humanized and whatnot. I feel like the more the general public will begin to understand the nature of that. And maybe that goes beyond sportsmanship. It's just the fact that we are human beings, and it all kind of ties itself together. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, Jack, you can take this back. Oh my gosh. For some reason, I guess officiating, no matter how old you are, it just brought back to my mind. I had a nephew of mine who was a really good soccer player in high school. And he decided he wanted to try to make some extra money on the side by refereeing youth soccer. And he did it for a couple games and he quit because the parents were just so bad of yelling and screaming. And I'm sitting there going like, what is it with this, that these parents would yell and berate a kid who's 18, 17 years old? He's out there. Obviously, he's not a professional official. He's out there giving his time. Yes, he's making a couple dollars. But if you didn't have him, you might not have the game.
Right.
And these parents, for some reason, take the liberty, and I don't know where they get that from, why they think they can take the liberty, even at these youth games. And you can go even younger than this. You've heard things about T-ball games, you've heard stories, and you just say, my gosh. And this is, I think, where the kids, as later on as players, they learn it from their parents. I mean, you might even have the best coach around that doesn't say anything, but their parents they hear their parents berating the other team, berating their officials, and it's almost like, oh, come on, our society's got to just stop with this stuff. They really do. I mean, you're spoiling it for the kids, and at the same time, they probably don't even realize, as they're supposed to be parents and raising these kids to be sportsmanlike, and they're just doing the exact opposite, and they can't even look in the mirror.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because it's almost like parents are sort of trying to live vicariously through their kids in a way. You know, maybe maybe their kids are getting a chance to do something that they never really got to do, and they're treating the whole event as just, separate from their family lives. Like it's just like it's like a professional sporting event. And to go along with what Jack was saying before about, or maybe you, Steve, about officials being under so much scrutiny. I feel like it's one of those jobs where no one really notices that when you do a good job. It's only when you make a bad call, right? That's when people notice, right? I often make the parallels to like music production, something that's in the background, right? If there's a wrong note or something doesn't sound right, people are so quick to notice that. But if it's supposed to, just be part of the background and no one notices anything, then that's when you do the good job, right? So that's the feeling I get from it. Would you say that?
Yeah, that's Sean. That's really a good point, and I think that's part of the reasoning behind. I think this in the NBA when they have this last 2-minute report thing, which you can see online about the officials and if they were correct in the last 2 minutes of the game and or overtime. What you find is that when you look at 90% of the games, nobody's saying a word, but you get that one controversial call a month, maybe, or something like that. And people are all over it going, these guys stink. What's going on? You got to get better officials. They missed this call now. Okay. Maybe they had a bad game. Maybe they did miss 2 or 3 or 4 calls in the last couple of minutes, which no official wants to do. But look at the 95% of the other games that you're showing on the last 2-minute report, and they're doing a fine job. But you're right. It's Sean. They like to jump on any kind of controversy, but guess what? Unfortunately, that's our world. How we change it, I don't know. But you guys are on Twitter and Instagram and all this stuff, and all the nasty stuff that's in there is just crazy. It really is. How somebody, Jack, I don't know how you're on the Twitter stuff. I was on for maybe a couple times a couple years ago, and I jumped right back off. I just went, oh my gosh.
Brings out the worst in people.
Yes.
For sure.
I will be completely honest with you, Steve. Since about, leading up to the last election, I have sworn off all social media and I have not looked back, and it has been a blessing. I keep it around for business purposes, such as OSIP or other nonprofit stuff, my own work as a musician, stuff like that. It's a necessary evil to promote yourself, which
Sure.
That's another debate. It's the idea of trying to figure out how do you promote your brand and your services and any nonprofits with these altruistic missions. Okay. But you're also trying to speak softly and carry a big stick. You're trying to kind of, you would know this as much as anyone else as a deacon. You're not trying to bring attention to yourself. You're just trying to keep your mouth shut and do the good work. But at the same time, the nature of the beast is such that you have to promote it a certain way sometimes just to get the message. It's kind of like saying, if you want people to come into the church, you got to let them at least know that the church is there.
Yeah, right.
So that's the balance that I search for when it comes to social media. And I want to go back real quick when you were talking about the 2-minute report and whatnot. I think that leads to a great point about what you're doing as a rules analyst from time to time. Which I think is fantastic. I think you see it on NFL games, you see it in NBA games. You don't see it that much in baseball though. And I guess the first question I want to ask is, what was the adjustment like for you to get into that gig? Did you find it very smooth? Was it comfortable, or were there things that you had to kind of adjust to as you transition to that role?
Yeah, I obviously just going on TV and talking about it was kind of new to me. So that's always, and it still is a transition. I'm still not as comfortable as you have some of these guys out there who are on there all the time. I just try to inform and try to educate the viewers and do the best I can with it. And am I any good at it? Who knows? I mean, I hope they think I'm all right at it, but kudos first of all, kudos to Mike Pereira, because if it wasn't for Mike Pereira, who was the first one in this field, if he didn't do the job that he did and how eloquent he is, I don't think anybody else would have a job in that field. But it was a transition because you had to think about, all right, how can I, if somebody misses a play, how do I go about saying it without like killing the guy? I mean, because we hear so many announcers and even some former officials say, how could he make that call? I mean, guess what? We've all been there. I've been there many times. I've missed so many calls in my career that, you know, I know when I miss a call. So, but I don't need somebody just blasting me because I missed it. So I always try to think of a way of like, how do I put it? Of like when a person misses a call. Well, what I always like to look at, what I try to do is I would always go from the aspect of like, if I was watching my own game and that was me on the call, why did I miss that call? If I felt I did miss the call. And 9 times out of 10 is positioning.
Yeah.
That's what it is. 9 times out of 10. Now the other 10%, well, we just, you know, you missed a call or you got blocked out, whatever it may be. But if you're not in the right position, your chances of making the right call are obviously the percentages diminish, as we all know. And so I would try to explain it. The first thing I look at when I'm on a telecast, if a call is debatable or questionable, I look to see where the official is and who made the call. Because there are times, even when I was refereeing, we're taught not to call on the other side of the rim as a lead official underneath the basket. All of a sudden, you blow the whistle on the other side of the rim, your chances are diminished because the backboard's in the way, the rim's in the way, other people are in the way, and now you're just guessing on it. And I know as when I officiated, when I did that, boy, I tell you one thing, I was right maybe 20% of the time, and 80% of the time I got to stay away from that. Yeah. And you learn from it. So the transition was difficult because I didn't want to bury a guy, but at the same time, my credibility is at stake too if I don't say what I believe is a correct call or an incorrect call. So you have to balance it with your credibility to the viewers and to the fans, but also at the same time do it in a way that the official is not going to be able to sit there and go, yeah, I never want to see that Javie again. You know, he knows how tough it was. How can he say that about me? But I truly believe that when you're an honest official, and we all know that you missed a play, that you can sit there and just say, well, Steve was right. I was correct. But there's a certain way you have to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would always agree. Not only would I agree with that, but, you know, I preach sometimes to people when there's a missed call. I say, you know who knows that call was missed before anybody else? It's the official who made the call. So we don't need the fans to remind the official, you know, and I'm not saying that from this point of the analyst, but more from the standpoint of reminding the people who passed the judgment. If you think that official meant to miss that call or is happy that he or she missed that call, you're out of your mind, because I bet, you know, at least for me anyway, 99% of the time when I make a call that's wrong, as I'm making the call, I know it's wrong. And I think to myself, I can't just change it. You know, it's the mechanics don't allow me to change that necessarily, you know, so you kind of just have to live with it. And I think that's really important. And I guess the next question that I would follow up with there is, do you feel that maybe the hardest, like if I'm empathizing with you and I'm putting myself in the role of the former official turned analyst, do you feel that the line that has to get drawn is when you kind of vulnerably put out what you do and say it's now up to the viewer or the fan to kind of take it from there, and I have no control over that? And the reason I say that is because, like, I'll use the example from Sunday night again with the Braves and Phillies. I'm watching that. I'm going back over the replays. You know, I'm following on closecallsports.com, our sister site and whatnot. And I'm saying, okay, I understand why Lance Barrett made the call at the plate. And I also understand by the protocol what went into that long review to say that the call has to stand. Once you do that, trying to persuade other passionate fans that this is proper protocol and you just kind of have to live with it is very tough because they're so emotionally invested in it. And I have to learn to say, I did my part. I came to the conclusion of what I believe to be true, and I expressed it properly as someone who defends officials. Would you feel that that's kind of similar for you in that you have to say, I did my part, my credibility and my name are properly defended, and yet I was true, and so on and so forth. And if the viewers and the fans want to continue to do this, I don't have control over that. That's not on me anymore.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Jack. The tough part at times is in a situation as an analyst is the fact that we then are asked to give our opinion. So sometimes it's not even a matter of explaining what the protocol is and how you go about it. As you just said, okay, he made the call at home plate. Now the protocol is they're going to go to replay, and here's what the replay official said. So as an analyst, if you explain that, that's fine. And of course, you're going to have, you say, these fans who are going to disagree, even if it's obvious, they'll disagree because they wear their heart on their sleeve all the time. But sometimes as an analyst, then, as you explain that, the producer and or the person who is the play-by-play will say, well, Steve, what would you call right now if you were the replay guy? Or what would you say? So now that puts you in a little bit of a jar of like, oh, here we go.
Yep.
After all I've seen, okay, now I have to make my call on the floor or on the field. And that can get a little hairy, because sometimes I do want to skirt the issue because it is that tough of a call like it was the other night. And I'll explain, well, here's what they're looking at. Here's what the rule is. And they'll come up with a decision. Well, then all of a sudden you get hit with, well, what do you think it is? And you go, oh boy, here we go. So sometimes you just, like anything else, you answer honestly, and you just say, well, you know what? If the angles that I have and I see right now, this is the decision I would make. They might not make the same decision because, again, we have to remember, officiating also is not objective, it's subjective. It's subjective to the person who's looking at the call, the knowledge of the rules, and what they feel. Because I could, in basketball, many a time in reviewing tapes, my partners would say it's a blocking foul. I might disagree and say it's a charge foul. We're looking at the same play, and we're both refereeing in the NBA, paid professional referees. So it is a subjective profession, regardless.
Yeah. I think the only easy call there is to say, I'm just going to go to the bar and have a beer. I think that's the.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
The easy call is the last call.
Exactly. I got to write that one down, because I'm going to teach that to every cadet who comes in our system. Call it the last call. We need a beer sponsor for this program. You guys have any ideas? Or?
Figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we allowed to say?
Oh man, no, we have to get them to pay. That's what it is. I think that's good sportsmanship. Speaking of good sportsmanship, as we were preparing for this interview, Sean Gough threw this one at me, and Sean, maybe if you'd like to elaborate on this, the question that, like, I'm reading some of the notes, and the first one that I see is, how was sportsmanship introduced to you, Steve? And Sean, maybe you can double down on this, because I think that is such a great question to ask of an official. So, Sean, let me throw it to you first, if you have anything you'd like to add to begin.
Well, the only thing is, I'm not sure how long have we been talking about sportsmanship as a concept, separate from just, playing the game the right way, being a good sport, whatever. And of course, you didn't start out as an official, you started out as a player. So yeah, you take it from there.
Yeah. All right. Regarding who taught me sportsmanship, it was actually a hard lesson for me to learn, believe it or not. I had my share of tantrums as a kid, as maybe we all do when we lose a game. I still remember my father, and obviously there's number one who taught me sportsmanship. My father on a golf course with me. I got so upset on the golf course. My dad said, I'm never playing with you again until you learn how to control yourself. My coaches would teach me the same thing. If I acted a certain way in the game, they would take me out of the game. I still remember getting thrown out of a game in American Legion baseball. I mean, like an idiot I was, because I couldn't control my temper, and the guy didn't play me the next game. And so I think we learn it hopefully from our parents, number one, which are the ones that sometimes nowadays are tough to learn things from, because they're the ones that are losing control of themselves. And number two, I think it's from your coaches and your mentors. And that's who taught me that. But I had a rough time. I wasn't, I've always been competitive, still am today, even at my age, when I play golf or do other things. And I learned that it took me a while. I think it probably didn't take me I bet you I learned even in my 30s when I got into the NBA, because I was still a little too competitive and sportsmanship wise, I think in my 30s, I was probably okay. I probably just maybe had a little temper in there, but yeah, I think you learned it from your parents, your mentors, the people that bring you up. And when they don't try to teach you the sportsmanship, they're doing a disservice to you as a kid, because kids they have to learn that. If they don't, then how do we blame the kid when he becomes 20 years old and he's a professional athlete, or 25, who somebody never taught him sportsmanship? We can't blame the kid. It's almost like you have to blame the people who are raising him, saying you never taught him this, because the kid doesn't know any different. Yeah, it really is. Because I like to say, when I was on the floor, when players used to be a little immature with me and say certain things, I go, wait a second, I wouldn't treat you that way. Why would you think you can treat me this way? And every once in a while, you would get a player, not all the time. Every once in a while, you'd get a player stop and think, yeah, you're right. You haven't treated me that way. So therefore, I'll treat you with that same respect, and be more of a sportsman-like player.
That's beautiful to hear, because I think that I get the sense that our humanistic reaction is to set up defenses sometimes when we get into those situations. And I can speak from personal experience that, if a coach or a player or anybody's yelling at me while I'm working a game, one of my first reactions is fight, flight, freeze, as opposed to saying, wait a second, I don't treat you this way, so why are you doing it to me? And granted, there are certain things where it's like, okay, you really don't want to be addressing fans and yada yada yada. You're addressing players, you're addressing coaches and whatnot. But that's a mindset that I think we can really learn and perhaps try and use. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a mindset that we have to change, really, too. And I think as you're talking, Jack, especially I'm thinking of umpires in baseball. I used to think umpires would always get even more of a raw deal than I think any other sports official. I really believe that, because they would say, look at how that umpire reacted. Look at that. But I said, wait a second. Do you understand that umpire made a call? He wasn't the one that ran into the dugout, start yelling at the manager.
Right.
The manager's the one yelling at him. He's reacting to what was being said to him. So if you went out to the umpire in a respectful manner, I've never seen an umpire flip his lid when someone just go out there to talk to him. But when you go out there with your hat turned backwards, kicking dirt on home plate, yelling and screaming, acting like the jerk that you are, okay, well, how do you expect someone to react to you? What if somebody did that to you? What would you do? Just stand there and go, oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. It's not going to happen. So I think the umpires used to always, I would defend them all the way to the hill, because I'd sit there and say, guys, you don't understand. They're just reacting to how people treat them. As if they treated them with any kind of respect, they would certainly get the respect. But I would say, though, it would lend to like a lot less entertainment on some of those old time films of Marty Springstead and Earl Weaver and all that stuff. They were some of the great ones. I'm telling you, they're classics.
Oh yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you get the audio of it sometimes too, and you're just looking at it like, oh my God, what is going on between these cats? But see, here's the thing too, Jack. That's when men were men, and now in this day and age of, I'll be kind and just say, in this day and age of thin-skinned people, it's like, even like when I was officiating still, I had coaches call the league office on me because they didn't like what I said to them. And then when I would find that out, of course I would find that out because the league office in turn call me and say, did you say this, this, and this? And we have a conversation. Well, the next time I had the coach during the game, I would go over to him, and this would be the last conversation I would ever have with him, and say, if you had the guts just to talk to me man to man, instead of calling the league office like a big baby, I think we would get along a lot better.
So since you did call the league office, I think any other conversation you have right now about officiating shouldn't have me involved in it. You just call the league office. Don't even talk to me. And it just bothered the heck out of me. All right, you think you're a big bad coach in the NBA, but you can't handle the fact that I said something to you.
Right.
And it's like, what? I mean, holy moly.
You're right. I mean, it just goes down to the idea that we need to be able to have conversations with each other. I think like you said to baseball umpires, we look at the rapport that home plate umpires have with catchers and whatnot, and they work together. They're in a way, they're on the same team more so than other people because they're both back there with gear on, sweating their butts off. And, and they know for the most part. I mean, we've all seen clips of, the AJ Przinsky's of the world who will turn around and say to an umpire, give me a ball that you can actually see. And then get tossed, but for the most, I always go back to, I think it was Richie Garcia who was behind the plate when Yes Network analyst John Flaherty made his debut as a catcher. And Richie said to John, how are you? And John said, I'm nervous. And Richie said, you and I are going to get through this together. And the next thing you know, John has this new respect for Richie as it goes back to that humanizing thing and whatnot. That makes a world of difference when I think of our friend Jerry Lane. He's got that sense of humor and that calm demeanor where he'll have a conversation with anybody over anything. And it just goes to it's a hard thing to learn, but you're absolutely right that when the defense mechanisms go up, it's because people are yelling and screaming at you, and you think that, oh my God, what do I have to do to survive this? And it's not fair in a way,
Yeah, no, that was a good thing about Richie Garcia. I mean, that's a professional right there.
Yeah.
That is somebody who's handling a situation, knowing the situation, and this young kid's nervous and so on. And I think a lot more umpires would probably say that to that catcher, and people wouldn't even realize, wow, that's pretty cool. That's really human of the guy to do it, you know?
No, I agree with that. I agree. And I'm sure that there are a ton of stories that we don't know that are exactly like that too. And they just don't see the light of day for whatever reason. It makes me think like, and maybe you can speak to this from your experience, but you hear the stories of officials and coaches who appear to be having the argument on the field or on the court for the purposes of either the entertainment value or the firing up of players and whatnot. And then as soon as the game is over, they're proverbially at the bar together. I remember talking with retired MLB ump Dale Scott, who told me a story about, I think he was with Terry Collins when Terry was managing the Angels, and he had to run him, but it was because he said, I need you to run me because I can't watch this anymore. And he's doing the whole, the gesticulating and whatnot. And then he says something to Dale. He goes, Dale, I feel sorry for you because you got to stay out here for the rest of this game and watch this garbage, and I get to go back in the clubhouse. And you would have no idea that occurred if it weren't for that story. And that Terry was never mad at Dale. He was mad at his own players, but the story didn't make the light of day until that was told. I mean, can you share anything like that, or can you at least comment on that type of experience?
Yeah, and I think Terry Collins, as a matter of fact, just talking to a lot of umpires, is very well respected because of that too. I mean, because of situations like that, Jack. Mm-hmm. He was a guy that, wouldn't be just out there for the sake of being out there, berating the umpire. And we have the same thing in the NBA too, with regard to coaches who will come out. And top of my head, Greg Popovich was a great guy. He'd come out and he'd be upset and he'd be saying something and he goes, I'm not upset at you. I'm just upset at my players and so on and so forth. And I said, yeah, but Greg, 18,000 people are booing me right now. So please walk away. That stuff. But I even had a situation with Thibodeau, who I don't think I would like to. I think he's a heck of a guy. I really do, and a heck of a coach.
Yeah.
But I would like to see what his normal talking voice is, because I think his normal talking voice is 10 octaves higher than anybody else. And there were times I'd go over to the table and he'd be yelling. You could hear him yelling, but he's kind of talked to me as he goes, Tibbs, you got to calm down here. Everybody thinks you're yelling. He goes, but I'm not yelling at you, Steve. I'm just talking to you. But it's so funny. Certain guys you really respect. You really do. But then again, just on the other side of the coin, there are other guys who don't really care about the officials and the way that somebody like Terry Collins, Greg Popovich, Tom Thibodeau, like they do. It's really, and I know you guys know this too, as an official, it's great to have a coach like that because you respect them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean, like, I've thrown Greg Popovich out of games. I've given Thibodeau, technical fouls. That doesn't mean we don't respect each other. We do. But at the same time, we understand that it's a game. Certain things are going to happen, and certain situations will present itself where you have to take action. That's all.
Do you think that sportsmanship can be can be taught in that manner? Because I wonder sometimes what your take on the value of the technical foul is. You mentioned that things are going to happen in games, and that's part of the nature. Do you find that to be valuable for the teaching purposes or for enforcing sportsmanship, or at the very least letting that filter down to the younger levels or the viewers who are watching this? Or is there value to that? Or, what is your take on that?
I as opposed to Jack, and if you could say the question again, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. But if you could, are you saying the value of a technical foul is as opposed to, say, just like in baseball, you have an ejection?
I guess you could say that too. I know, like, for example, in high school baseball, we have the restriction to the bench, which is kind of the seatbelt first technical foul rule that they've put in to basically tell the coach, I'm not ejecting you, but you can't leave the bench area for the remainder of the game. No paperwork, no further suspension, etc. It's a shame that, in my opinion, it has to come to that at the high school level, because I'd like to believe that the coaches understand their roles as teachers to these student athletes. But like we've talked about, I understand the desire to win and all that stuff. Do you feel that something like that, which to me kind of translates to that first technical foul, can have value in teaching it? Or do you think that it's being abused? I don't know where to fall on it myself. And I feel like you're the person to ask. Yeah.
And listening to you put it that way, it's almost like now with the replay review in baseball, it changes the game totally with regard to, arguments and so on. It really does. But I do think that rule that you just described to me in high school is really I kind of like it. Right off the get-go, as you're describing it, because we're all competitive. We get to a certain level, we're all competitive, and there are times we're going to lose our emotions. And as long as the emotion isn't so drastic, where in basketball we say, okay, technical foul. Now in basketball, you don't have to stay around for that second technical foul. That emotional outburst could be enough that you're ejected on one.
Okay.
Very similar to an ejection in baseball. But 9 times out of 10, the little emotional outburst warrants that technical foul to say, get your emotions under control. It's unacceptable for you to act this way. And if you don't, then the second technical foul will mean ejection. I kind of like that rule in high school, where if a coach does get out of control a little bit, not to the extent where it warranted an ejection, but you're saying to him, hey, look, that's too much. I'm not throwing you for it, but if you do it again, I will throw you for it. I really do like that. I think it allows the mature person to hopefully get himself under control and go, all right, you're right. All right, I'm glad I'm still in the game, unless he said the magic words, which then he would be ejected, and he knows he'll be ejected for that.
Yeah.
But short of that, I think it's a good thing. I think it does. I think the technical foul, it does work. And I think also it works. How coaches, you were just saying before about coaches use it to protect their team or their stars. We used to always say with Greg Popovich, when you ever saw Tim Duncan with a technical foul, Popovich would have one too, because he wouldn't go on Duncan to get his second one.
Right.
He would rather have himself get one and take the attention away from Tim Duncan. It seemed to be. I'm just saying this. You would have to ask Greg Popovich if he did that intentionally. But to me, it was pretty smart on his part to get the attention away from his superstar, which he wants to stay in the game. And Popovich wouldn't care if he was ejected, that kind of stuff, or got a technical foul.
Right. Now that brings up an interesting point that I want to ask, because you see that, I think, in sports across the board. Okay. We see that in baseball all the time too, where a coach runs out to protect a player and get the player away. And if the coach has to go, he'll gladly go so that the player stays in the game. Do you think that, from the standpoint of the game and the management of the game, it makes total sense, because the manager or the coach isn't playing the game. It's the superstars who are playing the game, and it's the superstars who everyone's coming out to see. So there's an economic side to it, et cetera. Do you think that there is something, for the lack of a better term, almost wrong with that, because we're not teaching these adults not to act a certain way? It's almost like tough love in a weird way. I would say, when I would coach, I would say to some of the officials, I would be like, I'm not coming out to protect my player. You want to toss him. He's got to learn, Do you think that that's kind of backwards at the professional level, or do we just as a society have to accept that because of the value of the entertainment and the sport, that's just how it's going to be and we can't change that?
I'm looking at it a different way. Number one, I think it's good at the younger level,
right,
to do what you're saying, Jack, about let them learn self-control if they can, and some kind of sportsmanship. When you get to the professional level, I think, believe it or not, the thing I thought about as you're asking this question and setting a scenario, I thought about job security and money. I really did.
Interesting. I want to know more about that.
That superstar is the one who's going to win games for that manager or coach. And that coach his salary is dependent upon how many wins and losses. So if I can get as many wins, and that means 2 more wins in a year or 3 more wins, and I get to the playoffs, that's security for my job. So he's actually thinking it for himself too, of saying, I'm protecting not only the team, I'm protecting my job too. So I think the idea in his mind of teaching sportsmanship is thrown out the window at the professional level. I think that he figures that if the guy hasn't learned it by now, I'm not going to be the one to teach him, but I'm going to try to be the one to keep him in the game, because it's going to keep my job, and we go from there.
That I never would have thought of that. So that is amazing. I learned that today. That is, I am so glad to hear that, because it see, when I hear that, to be given a new slant on that, I don't know how it changes my opinion yet, but I do know that information is so new and so important to it that it creates, at least for me, a new sense of empathy that I think does speak to sportsmanship in a certain way, because you're saying, now, wait a second, now I understand this a little bit more. Even if I don't agree with it, I see where your heart's at, I see where your mind's at, and I can respect that. And that speaks to sportsmanship. Yeah. So that is absolutely amazing to think that.
Can I interject for a second?
Please.
Yeah. I was going to ask about trash talking related to that. A lot of basketball players, they almost, I think, enjoy it. It's like a sport in itself. But from our standpoint, as a sportsmanship organization, it's not like we want to go say, hey, you should learn how to trash talk. Have a good time. And yet it's part of the game, so where do you draw the line with that yourself?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question and observation, Sean. I think, and I have to give kudos to the NBA for this. When I was early in my career, you're right about trash talking. I mean, one of the best games I ever heard, I was refereeing Chuck Person and Larry Bird one after each other. And it was just, I wish they had the microphones on both of them. Maybe some games they did. But Larry Bird was just so good. He was incredible. And he just sit there and you go, oh my gosh, But what happened, it just like our environment in our world, I really believe sports are just a microcosm of our society. The trash talking back then was taking as a totally different way than it is now. The trash talking back then was if a guy got you good on the trash talk, you would sit there and probably run down the court and go, "You son of a gun! Yeah, you're right. You got me." But then if you did something to him, you could come back and he'd go, "Oh yeah, you got." It wasn't harmful. It was actually playful and funny. And but then all of a sudden, as society changed, the sports world changed, where it became more of a threatening thing. Like if you said that, you're questioning my manhood, or you're disrespecting me and all. And it wasn't meant to be that way. So the trash talking in the beginning was kind of fun. It really was. But it got to the point where it then would start this tension, and the tension then could lead to possible altercations on the floor. And I think this is where the NBA was really good when they said, "Hey, no more trash talking. It's a technical foul," where they call for taunting. We call that now taunting. And I know some of the announcers and all don't like that at all. And it's like, yeah, but you don't understand. The players are so different nowadays than they were 20 years ago, where it wouldn't have been taunting 20 years ago. You had guys dunking and standing over you, because know what you would do next time? You would dunk and stand over them. And that was, you know what? Okay, fine. And there wouldn't be no fights. But for some reason, as the society changed, could the maybe maturity or immaturity of players, the immaturity of players couldn't handle that. They couldn't handle someone taking a shot at their pride or their ego, and they wanted to lash back and fight maybe. And that's what I think the league saw. And the league jumped on that pretty quickly when I was in there with regard to taunting. And it made our job a lot easier as officials. Someone says something, taunts on, bang, hit him with a technical foul. And it did two things. It stopped the taunting, and it didn't lead to any other altercations, which was really good.
No, that's incredibly important, I think, because of like you said, the changing of the culture. And we've debated this, I think, internally a lot, because I think trash talking does have, like you said, there is a place for it, for lack of a better term. Maybe the change has to be in the etymology of the term, because it comes off so negative. Guys on the playground, so to speak, can tease each other with what I always call good-natured ribbing, and I've always used the line of demarcation to say good-natured ribbing is fine. It's when it goes past that it gets to be really, really unfortunate and inappropriate, and that seems to be, where we can't find that now. We have become much more sensitive to it, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, because I think sensitivity can be a good thing in a lot of places, but it's almost like a pendulum that swings too far to the other side due to the fact that it was too far over here, when it really just needs to be in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes you have to swing that pendulum to that far to the other side to get the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt. And you hope you get the middle.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, and even simple things of flag fouls now in the NBA. Years ago, they were just, and I think I made a comment the other night on the TV. It's like when I was in the league, the guy who went in the first row with a foul was a common foul. Yeah. Well, it was more than a common foul. There's no doubt, but the pendulum was so far left. It's like everything was just a normal foul. Now the pendulum swung the other way, where let's look at that. Is that a flagrant foul? All right, you're looking at it, but that's really not a flagrant foul. But I guess what we're trying to do is to get somewhere, like you said, Jack, in the middle. And I think that's what leagues are always trying to do, is trying to, when the pendulum gets so far one side, they got to almost go so far the other side. I mean, the NBA did that with what they called the respect for the game rules they started putting in 20 years ago about players reacting to calls and the people watching, the fans weren't liking the way the players were reacting to officials. And matter of fact, I think it's really, since we were in the bubble last year, and now you're at it, I think the players' reactions in the bubble were, boy, I know one thing, I'd have a hard time keeping my composure of the way players reacted. And I know the situations and the circumstances were different and unique, but guess what? It's different and unique for me too, as an official. Mm-hmm. And we had referees who were 90 days in that bubble without seeing family or friends too. So, I mean, we all had to try to get together. I mean, so it's not like just players, or not like just the coaches. You got to think of everybody. So, and I think that hopefully the pendulum swings back a little bit more towards the middle with the way the NBA and the players are reacting to officials. Because in my opinion now, I think it's gone a little too far to the left again of like they're letting too much go of like reaction, you know, and I think we got to swing it back.
Yeah. Yeah. That window of tolerance is changing through, you know, nobody's fault. It's the situation that we find ourselves in which we find ourselves. So I use proper grammar, you know, and it's tough. You know, I frequently have to tell people all the time, you know, it's hard to remember empathy right now. We're all going to struggle with this because of these circumstances, and that's okay. You know, we got to get through this together. I want to switch gears quickly because there's another great topic here that, you know, we would be remiss if we didn't discuss it. You are an ordained deacon now. First of all, congratulations. That is an amazing accomplishment. How has that been going for you?
Jack, it's incredible. It's probably indescribable. Nothing, I mean, this is something, as people in ministry know, it's a calling and it's not something you aspire. I mean, I never knew what a deacon did prior to checking it out. Obviously, after I felt I was called, I knew that I wanted to do something to serve the Lord and my Creator because He's blessed me in my life with so many great things that I just feel that it's only the right thing for me to do personally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all have our stuff that happen in lives. Nobody gets through this world unscathed. But all in all, He's just provided for me in every which way. And I just felt that I knew that I wanted to leave this world a little bit better, but also I wanted to leave this world not being known as a person who blew whistles on basketball players.
Right.
To me, that's nothing. I was blessed to be able to do that. And I think I said earlier that to make a living in sports, it was like, if you were to tell me that at 15 years old, I'd sit there and say, that's fantastic. But there's more to life than just blowing a whistle and calling a foul or calling it out of bounds or, you know, putting a shirt on and, you know, being on TV with ESPN. Who cares? I mean, that's a means to an end. It just so happens that I did something I enjoyed. But it was...
Although ejecting the mascot was pretty good. That was fun.
I knew I wouldn't get through this podcast without something like that. That's true. And you know what? Let's go back to that, Sean, after this, because I'll tell you the real story. Now that I'm retired, I can tell you the real story.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Limitations.
I mean, yeah, I'll tell you the real story. Actually, I told it at my retirement dinner. It's funny. 10 years ago, I can't believe I'm retired 10 years this coming spring. But I finally told it at my retirement dinner, and like people were like, because everybody thinks like I'm the biggest jerk in the world throwing out a mascot. I mean, here's this guy who looked like a basketball hoop, you know? I felt sorry for the guy, you know, maybe get out of that uniform, get another uniform. You know? Right. But no, getting back to the diaconate, after I retired, and obviously I retired because I hurt myself. I mean, I couldn't run anymore. As I said, I wanted to serve the Lord in prayer, and like in prayer, basically just I pray every day. I have a prayer chair at home, and I talk to the Lord like I'm talking to you guys. Like, help me out here. I need, you know what? It's going to be a tough day, or help, you know. And then I ask Him for, you know, prayers for my people who need prayers for, people who are sick or ill or dying. And I just ask Him to lead me in a direction that where I can serve you and your church. And He led me down this path, and it was 7 years in formation of going through the seminary in Philadelphia. I never was a great student before because I never applied myself. I applied myself on the baseball field. That's about it. But this time I wanted to learn more about my faith, and I wanted to learn more about the church and what the teachings of Christ. And it all made sense to me. Mm-hmm. And putting, as my pastor said, just put one foot in front of the other. This is where He's calling you. He'll complete it. If it's not, then He'll point you in another direction. And right up into ordination, and I'll never forget, obviously, ordination, which was in 2019 of June. I still remember my wife the morning of ordination waking up, and she goes, because you're never really sure. I mean, how are you sure about this? And she says, are you sure now? Here's the morning of ordination. Are you sure now? And I said, no, I'm still not sure. I wasn't sure until I was walking down the aisle of the cathedral in Philadelphia with my 6 other classmates. And I'm just looking up the crucifix. And I just said, well, I guess this is what you want from me, because I'm walking one foot in front of the other. And I was ordained that, that day. And let's put it this way. I had a great life in sports. I officiated all the greats, starting with Dr. J as my first year was Dr. J's last year, with Bird and Magic and Kobe and Michael and LeBron, all the great players, you can name them. And I loved it. I had a great career and I loved it. I really did. But I've never been as totally fulfilled as I am right now. I mean, there was something missing in my life that, I like that, but there was always something pulling in my heart for something more.
Right.
And this is the something more. Does it mean I love sports any less? No. But does it mean I prioritize it in a different way? Yes, it does.
Sense. That makes sense.
So that's the difference. My priorities are a lot different. My parish is phenomenal. I have a pastor who's like one of my best friends. He's almost an 83-year-old pastor who runs the largest parish in the Archdiocese. Wow. We have over 20,000 members at our parish. And it is just so full of the Holy Spirit. And these are the people that got me. I mean, I looked at the men at our parish and how full of the Spirit they were. And they're part of my faith journey. They're the ones who encouraged me to continue my formation and so on. So thank you for asking, Jack. It's been something, as I said, is indescribable. But I know that the Lord pulls at everybody's heart. And if we just get out of our comfort zone, because sometimes, especially with men have a hard time talking about their faith at times. And so on. Women are a little easier to do. But it's funny, at my golf course where I play, when I was in formation, it gave people permission, my buddies permission to talk about their faith, some good, some bad. But it gave everybody permission to say, hey, Jav, can I talk to you about this? Or what's going on with this? And what's the church teach this? And I didn't have all the answers. I mean, sometimes I'd agree with them, there's no doubt. But it's just, I think we as men have to let our guard down and almost let the Holy Spirit, let the Lord give us his grace so we can, feel his grace and know that it's okay to be a lover of the Lord and at the same time a lover of sports. They're not mutually exclusive. They really aren't. It's just prioritizing who's number one or what's number one in your life. And when you make him the Lord number one in your life, everything becomes, flows from there. Doesn't mean you're not going to have suffering and pain and sorrow in your life, but it means that you have someone there who's going to help you during those times. And like I said, to me, it's funny. I want everybody to feel the way I do about the Lord, because I thank the Lord that he came into my life even at a later age, even though I had my faith, but not to this extent. And I just talked to a group the other night. It's funny, at the University of Massachusetts on a Zoom call. And I just commended these young students at 18, 19, 20 years old who are feeling the Lord in their life. And I said, I wish I had that at your age, but I'm so glad I still have it at my age now. And I want that for everybody. I really do.
I guess that leads me to my next question. What's it going to take for me to get on the golf course with you to talk about my faith? Because I'm partly embarrassed. You're already a better golfer than me, because I rack up strokes like the more strokes, the better, because Sean Ryan will attest to this. You're supposed to pick up the ball after double par on each hole. And Sean, was I in 4 digits the other day when we played? 5 digits strokes?
Sure.
Well,
we have a rule. If you hit the golf cart in front of us, you get automatic par. So
that's the greatest rule ever.
Well, first of all, Jack, I'll play golf with you anytime. And a quick little story about being called to the diaconate. When I felt the calling after somebody was preaching to us at our parish, I went to my pastor and I said, boy, I think this is where the Lord's calling me to become a deacon, but I'm not sure and all this. And he goes, just reassuring me, take your time. We'll try this. He goes, I said, but you understand, I've got a problem. My pastor kind of looked at me, and you can imagine, like, well, you got a problem. Like, what's your problem? I said, I love golf and I love light beer. And he said, well, do you embarrass yourself? I go, on a golf course, I do.
Yeah.
So I'd be more than happy, but I'd tell you one thing, we're going to have the cooler full of beers. If we're going to sit there and hit golf carts, I'm going to drink a few beers.
This is me arguing. Watch. Oh my God. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I'll be the caddy and I'll bring the hats.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I'll finally get my hat. Yes.
Oh my God.
I was going to dress as the mascot, but I didn't know the uniform.
Oh, that okay. You wanted to get into the mascot
Yes,
now,
give us
right?
the story. Give us the story.
Okay. All right. So you have to understand, I'm a really young crew chief at the time. I think at the time the crew that I was on, and I still remember it was Billy Spooner and Donnie Vaden and myself. I don't think we equaled 10 years in experience. This is right as they went to a 3-man system, maybe a couple of years after that. So maybe 10 years for all three of us.
Yeah, 'cause this was the 80s, right?
What's that?
This was like the 80s?
This is probably like early this is like probably 91, 92, something like that. I think,
Okay.
yeah. Because, no, I got hired in 86. The 2-man system was 88. And probably around 90, 91, somewhere around there. I think 90, 91. I had to look it up, sure. Just want to see, okay. Just want to make sure you guys weren't frozen on me. So it's a game down in Washington. And of course, the first 45 minutes of the game go great. No big deal. And nine times out of 10, as an official, I used to hear stories. Anybody can run through the first 45. It's like the last 3. Well, we have a situation where we've gone down the other end. And Purvis Ellison, which you remember him, never nervous Purvis, right?
Yeah.
From Louisville. He goes on fast break. He gets called for a foul or something, and he takes the ball and he's in the backcourt. And I see this, but he throws it. And my partner actually catches it. I mean, it was really a pretty hard throw. And my partner catches it and puts it down. And I'm like, that's got to be a technical foul. I mean, you have to. And as I'm getting closer to the play, I'm going, no, you throw the ball at an official, even though he caught it, I'm throwing his butt out of the game. So if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have called just a technical foul, to be honest. But my being young, inexperienced, and I threw him out of the game. And so now here comes one of his players, Darrell Walker, who he and I never got along, and I throw him out of the game. And then now Wes Unsold, who might be one of the nicest men you ever want to meet in your life, intimidating, but very nice. He comes onto the floor and I throw him out of the game. So on this one call, which if I even didn't call anything, the game probably would have went on and everything would have been fine. But now I have 3 ejections and 6 technical fouls. Okay. Of course, we have a timeout, which it always happens. You have a timeout. And it gives the fans a chance to just go crazy on you. Well, of course, my partners didn't want to stand anywhere near me, and they're at the other end of the floor, and I don't blame them. And so now I see Donnie Vaden call me down the end of the floor. He says, Steve, come here. I come down. He said, the mascot is behind you, and he's making fun of you. And I said, okay, fine. So now I have to think during this timeout. All right, I've already ejected a coach and 2 players. I might have lost my job. I said, because how bad a job I'm doing here. So I'm going to go over to the scores table here. And as I get a drink of water, I see the guy who is the PR guy, who I know, young guy at the time, still there, as a matter of fact. And I said to him, hey, Dolph, do me a favor. Tell the mascot he's got to stay off the floor the rest of the night. Okay, just please do that for me, because I don't want to get involved. Steve, I'll take care of it for you. Great, thanks, Dolph. As I turn around to get a drink of water, the fans are going nuts. And I'm going like, what happened here? Well, I look, and Dolph's on the floor saying, he just told me that he's out of the game. He's ejected from the game. Get him off the floor. And he gets security to escort him off the floor. And as I'm sitting there taking my drink of water, I just went like, oh my gosh, how do I explain this in my game report? I mean, this is crazy. I said, oh my gosh. And so now the fans are going nuts. And after the game, I'm just sitting there. And this is before any kind of internet, of course, and email. I had to write up this game report. I mean, it took me all night. And then you have to report it. By then, it was by, I think, some kind of like, you had to call in some number, an 800 number, and explain everything that happened. I don't think I got any sleep that night. All I know is it's all over Sports Center. It's going crazy. My mentor, Joey Crawford, calls me up. I'll never forget this. He calls me up and he said, this might be the greatest thing that ever happened to you. I said, What are you, crazy? I said, I might lose my job with all this stuff. I ejected a coach, 2 players, and now a mascot, they think. No, he says, Steve, I'm telling you, the players are going to think you're the craziest son of a gun in the world, and they're not going to come near you anymore. And he said, this could be great for you. And I just couldn't see that happening until the very next night. I'm working a game in Indianapolis, back-to-back game. And I'm standing there during the pregame as their layups, warm-up lines, and so on and so forth. And I'm just standing there watching, and Reggie Miller and I catch eye contact. And he mouthed to me, he said, the mascot? Just like that. And I kind of shrugged, and then I went, maybe Joey Crawford's right. Maybe they'll think I'm really crazy and won't say anything to me. So that's kind of the mascot story. I never ejected the mascot. He was just supposed to casually get off the floor, and then all of a sudden, all this hell broke loose, So, gosh, crazy.
That sounds so Seinfeldian, Costanzian, if you will.
Right.
The
exactly.
Mascot, the Mahatma, just, oh my God.
Right.
I love it. Oh my God. I might have to start telling that story now too when people ask me. I'm like, this isn't even my story. I gotta write Steve Javie a check for royalties every time I tell this story at the bar now. Oh man. Steve, before we let you go, I want to make sure I give a plug and give you plenty of time to talk about your charity and your foundation. Please give us every information about it, all the good stuff that you do. I was researching it, and I feel like I won't do it justice. I need to give you the floor to tell us about your foundation and all the good work that you do.
Jack, I appreciate that. What we've done recently is called the Javie Foundation for Charity. It has now been put on hold a little bit because we've taken our efforts elsewhere, and I'll explain that. But the Javie Foundation for Charity, it was in existence for about 12 years. We donated back to our community. And I say this because I'm just proud of the people who support it. It's not me, but everybody needs a vehicle to support. All right. I'm just so blessed to have so many friends that want to help out. And I think we all do. We all know that even in this day and age of Twitter, of social media, there are so many more good people out there. It's incredible. And for some reason, we want to be led to believe that this world is horrible, people are awful. No, 95%, 99% of people are really good people. And through our foundation, we found out that we knew that because they were just so helpful in our efforts to raise money for local charities that needed money. They really did. And in 12 years, we donated back to our community over $1 million. And it's like I said, it's because of the help of the people who want to give. They just need a vehicle to give to. And we were that vehicle for a while. Since then, we took our efforts into, we moved from one area of our city to another area of the city. And my wife and I, she was president of this organization called the Legacy of Life Foundation. And it's a women's center that help women who are in crisis pregnancies to help not only save the life of the baby, but also to administer to the women who need the help also, who are going to be the mothers of these children. And this group, this Legacy of Life group, does that with so many different programs of even hopefully counseling the person and know that they do have a choice. Their only choice isn't Planned Parenthood and aborting the baby. That's not the only choice. What are your objections? And they answer the objections, whether it be money, place to stay. And this organization provides everything for 3 years from the time they're pregnant till 3 years after the birth of their child. They'll provide help and assistance for these women to get them back on their feet, to provide for them and their babies. And it's just an incredible ministry that these women are involved in. Like I said, my wife was president for like 10 years. And I'm telling you, you talk about being humbled, thinking that you're doing something good in your world. And you see these women counseling these women who are really in crisis. They are, and they don't know where to turn. But society says it's okay to kill your own. And I'm sorry to say that it bothered me more than anything else. And so I put the foundation aside. I don't know whether we'll get back to that for now, but now we're putting more of our efforts into this. And quite frankly, the work that these women are doing, counseling and providing, in the past, they basically save almost a baby a day at this one center. It's incredible. Last year was like 360 babies they saved. And these women give testimonials who come to the house and the organization. We provide barbecues for them every week. They come and they have little social gatherings to familiarize themselves with other women that are in their same situation, and they can relate to them. It's almost like a support group. No, not almost. It is a support group for it. So that's the work that we're doing now in our organization and in our community, and putting our efforts into that. And I thank my wife for that, Mary Ellen, who not only is a person who got me back to my faith when I met her 30 years ago, but also has shown me always in my life how to love and how to love more and love other people, and to, to help out in the communities. Like I said, I always said, I don't think I've had an original thought, whether it be in my mind, whether it be in my profession, basketball, or in life. God's blessed me with mentors in my life and people that he puts in my life that just try to point me in the right direction. And I think, it's funny, we think about, and I'm getting on a little soapbox here, but we think about God talking to me. And I know I used to think about that. How does God doesn't talk to me. Well, maybe you don't hear that booming voice that you think you're, but he puts that simple thought in your mind that you can't get out. Or he puts that person in your life that directs you a certain way. Or he allows you to get into the situation, which you might think is the most terrible situation in your life. But from that situation, you learn and you actually become closer maybe to him with your love. And I know in my worst situation with that tax situation years ago with the thing, it was the most horrendous situation I've ever had in my life. But I know I got closer to my Lord and to my wife. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it all over again. So God speaks to us in so many different ways. And he continues to, with me and my wife, in different ways, how to serve the community.
That's so fantastic. Is there a website or a phone number or anything that you'd like to provide for that group in case people want to donate or find out more?
Yes, it's called legacyoflifefoundation.org. legacyoflifefoundation.org.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Jack.
It's my pleasure. We have to make sure that we are, extending that olive branch, that arm to the people who are doing so many good things. And it's the simplest thing, in my opinion, to just be able to provide that platform for you for the work that you do. I wish that, I wish I could do even more in this moment. And let me ask Sean and Sean real quick. Is there anything else in my insanity that you guys want to touch on? You want to say anything that I missed? Because we all know that, I have trouble dressing myself. So let me ask you guys.
Think of anything. I mean, it took me 2 hours to put on a pair of pants this morning. So I get it.
Are we having a contest about this, or it's an Olympic sport, the 2 hour pants putting on?
1 hour per pant leg.
Okay. That's math. That is math, baby. You don't need a calculus course for that. Sean Gough, did I miss anything because of who I am?
Oh, it's not you. No,
Okay.
I think, no, I feel like anywhere else we go, we'd be on for another 2 hours, which would be great. But
yeah, we know that people have short attention spans. So
exactly.
Yeah.
You got to think about the audience.
Right. Yeah. I got to think about lunch, so that's equally as important. Steve, I cannot thank you enough. This has been a joy to have you on, and a blessing. I think I speak for Sean and Sean and for all of our organization when we say how lucky we are that you could join us today. And I wish you and your charitable work and your family and your church and everything nothing but the best. I look forward to reading all the good stuff, and I especially look forward to the light beer as I try and hit every golf cart that and I will ask one of the Seans to please bring your phone with the camera so that we can make this memorable and put it on YouTube or something, just because we need that.
Hey guys, seriously, it's been a pleasure. It was nice speaking with you. Nice meeting you via Zoom. Seriously, someday, hopefully either one of you just let me know. Maybe we can get together, the four of us, and just play a little round of golf. And if not, just sit around and, as they say, chew the fat over a couple of beers. I would really enjoy that, guys. But thank you very much. It's always a joy. It really is to talk with you guys. Thank you.
It's our pleasure, and you can be sure that you'll be hearing from us. So thank you, Steve. Sean, thank you as always for all that you do for the podcast and for the organization. Reminder to everybody, obviously, osipfoundation.org, podcast at osipfoundation.org, facebook.com/osipfoundation, Twitter and Instagram at osipfoundation, hashtag how you play the game. We'll talk to everybody when the calendar turns to May. And until then, everybody, please treat each other with respect.
Amen.
How You Play the Game is a production of the OSIP Foundation, Incorporated. The producer-engineer of this episode is Sean Ryan. Music by Soundspring Studio. The executive producer of How You Play the Game is Jack Furlong. For more information, visit osipfoundation.org.